All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Beauty and the Beast lecture. I am Nick Lugo, and I'll be taking you through essentially what Beauty and the Beast means, because I think we watch these movies and then we get a glimpse of what they mean. Like there's the one main message that they try to send out, but there's so many deeper levels behind this. And well, this is the tale as old as time. This movie is actually, this fairy tale is, I think, 4,000 years old that we know of, and it's been passed down through the centuries. So there's actually something true in that statement, right? Like this is the tale as old as time. There's something true in this, and this could be broken down in so many levels. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Hopefully by the end of this, you could sort of, take out some sort of lesson, right? So the idea behind Beauty and the Beast, and this is what really attracted me to it: tale as old as time, true as it can be, right? And what does that mean, right? When someone makes the claim that it's as true as it can be, they're actually making the claim that this is real, right? Like a fairy tale is real. And well, I've been trying to make sense of that statement, and what they're really trying to say is that this is actually something that applies to real life. And this actually, this is not just a fairy tale. This is real. This is you could use these lessons in your life, and I'm going to put that to the test here. And I've extracted multiple life lessons, multiple psychological aspects of this movie, and hopefully that you could take the lessons here. And I know I certainly have been mulling over these lessons for a while, but hopefully you could take these lessons and actually apply them to your life and actually use them to make your life better, because that's actually the purpose of why we have stories, and it's really funny, because I have one friend, and she is literally Belle incarnate, right? Like, she is literally Belle, and then I have another, she's dating some guy, and he's the representation of the Beast, and they're literally Beauty and the Beast, like, incarnate, and I'm watching it play out, and it's actually incredible. So the thing that I'm learning as I sort of go through these movies, and as I sort of go through this entire lecture series, is that these stories manifest themselves in real life. Right? The reason why we have these stories is because maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's because it's happened so many damn times in real life that somebody decided, okay, let's put them all together and just throw a story out. And because so many people can relate to it, therefore, it's as true as it can be. So let's get started, and let's get started going right off that fact. It depends who you want to be in this story, but Belle is you. If you believe that you identify with Belle, right, if you like this story, hopefully you're watching this because you like this story. If you like this story because you obviously are a woman probably looking for a romantic relationship, Belle is you. And this is a story about how you can, we'll say, go on a heroine's journey, because that's literally, this entire story is a heroine's journey. How to take a uncivilized man and civilize him, right? And then the Beast is you, right? If you want to look at yourself from that perspective, sort of the masculine perspective, right? If you are, we'll say, uncivilized or not mature is a good way of saying it. So if you aren't the person that you want to be yet, if you aren't, we'll say, the typical hero, who's ascended to the top of masculinity and all these things, which is, we'll say, the goal of maturity, right? Hopefully the goal of maturity is to develop a strong sense of self, and to grow up and develop responsibilities, right? Like, that's a good sum of what a good adult is. And if you have not done that yet, then well, the answer here is maybe a woman can help you do that. And also, here's the developmental process that you're gonna have to go through, because the Beast sort of go through a little hero's journey here, and you'll be able to see it. And then to sum it all together, right, this is your world, right? This entire, the entire purpose of this book, right, of this movie, right, is really to take yourself and place you in there, right? Like, you're not a passive person watching the screen, because that's not actually how you view it, right? We identify with these characters. Actually, if you were to take an MRI scan of, if I actually, I don't know if it plays out through a screen, but when I tell a story and you're sitting across from me, when I'm telling that story, our brainwaves match. We actually, like, you could actually match our brainwaves and say that we are on the same wavelength, right? Wavelength's it's a casual term, but we're on the same level, right? We're literally, it's as if you're placing yourself in my story. It's as if you're matching me to step inside of my story to understand it as well as you can. And that's exactly what we do with these stories. We're not actually passively watching these stories. We're stepping into this world and we're embodying one of the characters, which is typically the main character. So it depends who you want to be, but you already have chosen. This isn't something that you could consciously choose. You are Belle or you are the Beast, and all you have to do, if you really want to get some life lessons out of this, if you really want to understand this, pretend like this is actually you. Don't pretend like you're a passive person sitting behind. So, I mean, I personally, I see myself as the Beast. Obviously, I still have development left to do, and I find that seeing myself as a Beast could actually say, okay, where do I identify most with the Beast? And obviously, it doesn't have to be the freaking hair growing from my face or the claws, but where does my personality match the personality of the Beast? And what paths does he take to grow himself, right? And that's that's why we have stories. We have stories so that you can grow from them. We have stories so that you could take someone who has achieved success or failure and learn from them, right? That's exactly what we're going to do here. But the only way that you could do that, or at least the most efficient way in my estimation, is to place yourself in the world, right? Place yourself in the world of we'll say this faraway land and pretend like it's actually you. So, that's my spiel to get started. Let's get into the characters. So, the first person that we meet is, and by the way, I really liked the original version of Beauty and the Beast, and I really liked the new version. The reason why I'm going with the new version is because, first of all, it's newer, right? So it has a little bit more appeal to it, and also it's really, really, like, they hit the archetypes a lot better, right? They did a good job of hitting the archetypes. So they're a little bit more explicit in the way that they have it, instead of just being completely encoded. So that's why I use the new one. But I'll be flipping back and forth between the old and the new one. Some different screenshots and stuff like that. So we have this guy, right? And this guy is a prince, right? This is how it begins. So here's a good representation of him. Before I even get started, here's the representation of the prince, right? Obviously a little bit, weird with the makeup or whatever. And he's sitting on his little golden throne. And the perfect representation of him is somebody who is undeveloped and immature, right? And spoiled. Spoiled's a good way of putting it, right? Like, he has seen the entire aspect of the good life, and because he's seen the good life, he literally just has no desire to mature, right? And the thing is, he's always got what he wanted, so he never really had to strive for something that was meaningful, right? It's like, why go on a hero's journey if you have all that you ever needed? Which, hey, listen, that's good reasoning, right? That actually makes sense. So, and that's why people are spoiled, right? We look at that and we ask, why are we all spoiled? And well, that's the reason why. And, I know there's different degrees of people being spoiled, but I mean, I find myself somewhat spoiled. I find that, society in general is somewhat spoiled, right? Like, you look around and you say that, the basic human needs are like food, water, and shelter. And, we have an abundance of food, we have abundance of water, and we have abundance of shelter. So it's like we literally in our society have, like, we're, from an evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective, we are literally as spoiled as can be. Well, the problem with that is, and this is the main problem with guys that I see today, right? This is the main problem that I see with essentially all my friends, If you were a hunter, right, 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, you had a set purpose in life. Your purpose in life was determined for you. And what was it? It was, I am going to hunt, right? I'm going to hunt. I'm going to protect my tribe from jaguars and lions and all of these things. And that's it. I'm going to do that every single day, right? And then I'm going to have a kid, and then I'm going to propagate the species, right? Like, that's the goal. That's your set purpose, right? But that makes life easier because you don't have to figure it out yourself, right? You don't have to go through this rigorous, difficult process that we have to go through in society of what is my purpose in life? What do I actually have to, what will give my life meaning, Because bringing food home for your family is meaningful, right? And that's something that hunters and gatherers did, And, well, now you ask the question, it says, okay, now we have an abundance of food, right? Obviously, this is mostly as children, but this goes for an adult too. We have an abundance of food, we have abundance of shelter, we have abundance of water. It's like an abundance of safety, right? That's another thing. Like, we don't have jaguars coming in and tearing apart our children and our friends, So we have these things, and now we're left with this hole of, okay, what is my meaning in life? What is it that I have to do to make my life meaningful? And, this prince is the representation of someone who hasn't figured that out yet. He's the representation of Peter Pan. Peter Pan is a really good, he's a really good representation because this is you, right? Peter Pan is a representation of you if you are undeveloped. He's a child who lives in Neverland, right? A place that is, obviously far off, and it's not part of this world. And the reason why his name is Peter Pan, right? Pan means everything, right? Pan means that essentially he has the potential to be everything, right? He hasn't chosen one specific path. He hasn't chosen one specific purpose. He just decides that he's going to remain as everything. And that means that he hasn't pursued any sort of potential. One of the greatest phrases, quotes that I've ever heard is, you don't want potential written on your tombstone, right? And that really makes sense to me. Like, that really, really hits because, well, we sit there as kids and we say that we're going to cure cancer. We say we're going to be part of the MLB. We say we're going to be the next sports player, astronaut, all these things. And that's our potential. But the question is, and this is the most difficult question. It's like, okay, you could create any plan, you could create any structure of who you want to be and what you want to do. The hardest part is actually going out and doing it. That's the thing that's incredibly, incredibly difficult. And this is the fundamental problem that men have been struggling with for a while, and particularly women too. But the thing about women is that women, they have this set path, right, of, I can be a mother. Like, I always have this thing to fall back on, which is being a mother. For men, it's not so simple, You could say that that's sort of misogynistic, right? But it's actually worse for men, right? It's actually worse for men, In history, as you go across all time, right? 80% of women were reproductively successful, right? Because, well, you have people like Will Chamberlain, right? Will Chamberlain had sex with over 20,000 women, right? And obviously, why would he not want to spread his seed everywhere, and pass on his species, pass on his genes to the next to the next generation? Only 40% of men were successful, right? So 2 times the amount of women were successful as compared to men. And that's because you have the men that are like Wilt Chamberlain, right? The ones who have pursued their potential and followed their dreams and have done all the things that they need to do. We'll call them the alphas, right? And then you have the other 60% who literally just fall out of the gene pool. And they're unsuccessful, right? Like, they haven't developed. We'll say they're the representation of Pan, right? They're the representation of this prince, because he literally has never pursued anything and is just sort of, there's nothing really special about him. And and they are just undeveloped, immature people, right? And then they never have access to sex. So they never have access, to sex and then to propagating the species. That's sexual selection theory. So the thing is, women have a set path for them, and you might say that's misogynistic, but I say that men just have no path for them. They literally have no path to strive for, and no matter what, they are, left with this problem of, if I don't do anything, then I'm literally worthless, right? Women say, if I don't do anything, then at least I'll be able to be a great mother for my kids. And, that's the problem. That's why the man in this case is the representation of Peter Pan, right? Of somebody who hasn't pursued their potential and is at risk of, we'll say, dying with a meaningless life, and dying as someone who hasn't pursued their potential, right? So, so now we get into the point of, what is this guy actually like, right? What is this guy actually like? He's self-interested, right? He's self-interested, and here's something that we'll get into a little bit later. I don't really want to go into it now, but he sees the world as tools. Here's his problem, right? You have someone like this, his name's Cogsworth, right? It's his servant who holds out a clock. And we're watching this, right? Here's why I say that you should view this in the perspective of Beast, because you're watching this, and it's interesting how they only show his hand, right? They only show his hand because he doesn't care about what his face looks like. Here's a better representation, right? This was literally in the same scene. So you have, right, he's holding out his hand here, and you can see that, but his face is dark. And that's because that's the way that the beast sees the world, or the prince in this case. He sees the world, he only sees this guy as somebody who will give him the time. He doesn't see him as a person. And it shows that he's self-interested. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's all you need to know for now. And it's the same thing with this, right? He only sees the lamp, which ends up being Lumiere, right? He only sees not the lamp, the candle, right? The candle lights, as something that will show him himself. That's it. And obviously he's a little bit narcissistic because he only cares about himself, but he doesn't even care about the lamp itself or the candlelight itself. So that's his problem. He's immature. He's Pan, right? What happens? The female comes along, right? A feminine character, right? The old lady. And she offers him a rose, right? So we'll get into that. And what happens? He denies the rose, right? So let's go with surface level first, right? So she offers him a rose. This man is a prince, okay? He doesn't care about a rose because a rose has no monetary value, right? He's going to say, what will the rose do for me? And, he's right. If you're looking at it from a purely economic perspective or a purely self-interest perspective, then you're going to say, what does a rose do for me? And the answer is nothing, right? It does literally nothing. So the lady, old hag, right? The way that they described her, offers him a rose, offers him essentially nothing for something in return, and he says no, right? Because he's self-interested. What does this have for me, right? And that's what the clock represented too, right? He doesn't care about the person. He doesn't care about Cogsworth as a human. All he cares about is, what does he do for me? And he shows me the time, right? So he's self-interested, and then she turns into, and this is from the original Beauty and the Beast, she turns into a beautiful woman, right? And then he gets on his knees and he begs. Why? Because there's self-interest involved there, right? From a, again, surface level perspective, it says, okay, now I have this, now she's of some sort of value to me, right? Probably something like relationships and sexual satisfaction, something like that. And then he gets on his knees and he begs for her because he understands that she is some sort of interest to me. And then she turns him into a beast, right? And okay, so now let's go back and let's understand what that actually means, you know? So you have this old, we'll say magical creature, right, comes in and offers him a rose. Now you ask the question, what is a rose, you know? And The only real way that I could describe a rose is a representation of life, right? You look at something like money. Do I have money with me? I have a receipt here, right? Money and a receipt are essentially the same thing. It's a piece of paper, right? And you ask the question, it's like, what is the meaning behind money? And you could say, it only has value in the material world, right? I think that's something that we completely understand. You take something like that and you say, okay, money has value in the material world, but then you step into this realm of, well, maybe the spiritual world, or maybe sort of the meaning world, because that's really what this movie is really all about, meaning. So you ask the question, it's like, will money give you meaning? And the answer is like, kind of, right? Like it will a little bit, but it's really not going to satisfy those deeper desires that you really have, and like your desire for love, your desire for relationships, your desire for, we'll say, self-actualization is the general term, but it's more of just, understanding who you are. All of these things are a representation of life, a representation of how you should, the things that will actually make your life meaningful, and they exist completely outside of the material realm, the realm of money and value and things and all of these. So the lady offers him a rose. She offers him life, and she says, you can see me as a human, or you could see me as the old lady delivering a rose, right? That's a good way of looking at it. You could see me as a human person who has a divine value within them, right? Even though I'm ugly, right? Like, yeah. She says, even though I'm ugly, even though I have no monetary value to give you, you could still see me as something with value because I am human. And that's something that we have adopted as a culture. That's something that it is something that's embedded within our culture. The golden rule is something that is Christian as well as American. It's treat people the way you want to be treated. Why? Why do you treat people the way you want to be treated? Even if they're your enemy, love thine enemies. Why do we say that? It's because there's something valuable within humans, There's like humanity itself gives them some sort of value, and it gives them some life. There's some life that resides within them, and we could say that's the representation of the woman, right? The representation of the woman here is, I am not giving you anything of monetary value, yet I have some value to give you. I am human. I'm offering you my humanity, and I'm asking you to recognize this rose, which is a recognition of my humanity. Will you do it? Even though it offers you no such self-interest. And he says no. Right? And that's exactly what it means. So now, this is the perfect representation of self-interest, right? We now have established that he looks at the world as only things that will give him value on the monetary level, or something like that, right? Give him, only things that will give him value, right? Then she turns it, now, right, we move into the next step. She turns into this beautiful goddess who obviously is some sort of, we'll say, figure to be desired, right? And obviously now he desires her, right? Now he wakes up, right? He snaps out of his, we'll say, self-interested, spoiled stupor, and he wakes up. And, well, what is the meaning of that, right? The meaning of that is the feminine, right? And this is something that's going to be explored throughout this entire movie, but this is a good place to talk about it. The feminine is what makes a man conscious. The feminine is the thing that wakes the man up, because it's the first time that he really has to get in touch with life. Whenever, this is something that you see in your, I'll take it into a general, life, right? Like a real life example. You see this all the time where you have men who they're very close, right? Obviously, you imagine in middle school there's like, obviously like guys on one side, girls on the other side, they're completely separated. And then you have your guy friends, right? And this is something that guys will really understand. You have your guy friends, and you have this good representation of, okay, here are the boys, right? Here are the guys that we have. But then one guy comes along, and he's probably the most developed of all the guys, and he gets a girlfriend, right? And when he gets a girlfriend, then what happens is the group starts to break apart because he stops spending time with the guys as much, and he starts, he starts spending more time with the girl, and he enjoys spending more time with the girl. And you ask the question of why. Obviously there's the love component, but that's kind of the reason, right? He finally has looked beyond the childish nature of just hanging out with the guys and says, okay, I'm going to step into life now. I'm going to wake up, and I'm going to, do something that is, we'll say, more integrated into the world. He's a better picture of the world. And then you have guys that are, right, then the guys are really pissed off about that because they're like, we just lost our friend. But, that's really the way it is, and that's the unfortunate reality of it. It's like, the way that guys act is that we only operate on the, only hanging out with guys is incredibly shallow because you're missing out half of life. Obviously there's another half of life. So there's this idea that the feminine makes a man conscious, and there's a strong evolutionary explanation for this. You imagine something like monkeys, and with monkeys, they didn't have this system where men come along and they get to choose men, right? Females don't choose men for sex. It's just, sort of what happens is they get a little red, right? Their butt turns red, and then it says, okay, I'm available for sex. And then the men fight amongst each other, and then whoever wins in this fight gets to have sex with the woman and therefore has kids, But the problem with that is that competence is not even a factor, right? The woman does not say, I'm going to go for the man that is the most intelligent, that is the most resourceful, all of these things. It's like, no, I'm going to go for the man that's the strongest, because only the men fight each other out physically, and then the winner gets the girl. For humans, it's a lot different, right? Women began to select, right? For the first time ever, women began to select, and now that we have this, then what happens is you have your monkey men, right? We'll say the men that are powerful and strong and all these things. Essentially the ones who are going to fight amongst themselves for the women, but that's not what's going to get them the girl now, because the game has changed. The game has changed to the woman wants somebody who's resourceful, competent, and resourceful and competent, and therefore, right, she has the ability to reject the brute, strong man if he's dumb, right? Roughly speaking, and therefore the man has to become conscious, and therefore the feminine is making the man conscious. And you could imagine that sort of, that maybe sped up the evolutionary chain. That's one of the theories, right? Or maybe that's one of the strong reasons as to why humans are smarter than animals. It's because women started selecting for competence, right, instead of power. So now the competent men are the ones who pass it on to the next species, and therefore the more competent you are, the more likely you are to succeed, and then therefore there's this sort of feedback loop that develops. So there's this idea that the female makes the male conscious, and I think that's pretty accurate. So now So now here's the part in every hero's journey. Right now we're on the guy. Right, we're on the guy part. We're at the part where every hero realizes that he is inadequate. Right? Imagine you say you're going to go to the gym. Right? Super simple. You say you're going to go to the gym and you say you're going to start working out more. This is something that's universal, right? You could say this is a hero's journey, right? The goal to go and do something and achieve something. That's it, right? You go to achieve your hero's journey. Now, what happens next, right? What happens next is in that moment when you decide to achieve something, you realize that you're inadequate. That's the most important part. You realize that the reason why you haven't achieved the goal in the past is because you don't have the necessary skills to achieve it, right? The reason why you haven't gone to the gym is because you feel super lazy and you have this, we'll say, strong desire to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, roughly, and well, that's the equivalent of waking up, right? That's the point where he's at. It's the point where you realize that, wait a second, I'm not the person that I want to be yet, and that's a problem because I need to become a different person to achieve my goal. That's it, right? So to be able to get to the gym and to be able to be, right, when you say you want to go to the gym, you don't want to go to the gym. Yeah, you don't want to go to the gym. You want to be the type of person that goes to the gym. You don't want to just go to the gym for 2 weeks and then sort of have it fizzle out. You want to really integrate that into your personality. You want to be the type of person who says, I go to the gym for 30 minutes every single day. And whenever somebody asks you, that's sort of the answer that you give. And so it's really not the development of action, it's the development of character. And that's an important point. That's a very, very important distinction because that's what gives rise to the beast. That's exactly what gives rise to the beast. You say, I'm not the person that I want to be yet, right? So he was Pan, right? We'll say he was Peter Pan sitting on the golden throne, living his life of impulses and pleasure, right? Which is something that we do as kids. But then he realizes, wait a second, I'm inadequate. I am not this king sitting on a throne. I am not I don't understand the world as strongly as I thought I do, and maybe I'm not as competent as I thought I was, because clearly this woman rejected me. So something's wrong with me. I didn't achieve the goal that I wanted to achieve. And therefore, he becomes conscious of the fact that he is a beast. So that's okay. So I'll take you through. I think I explained that well. The only thing is now the reason why this transformation happens, and this is a good way of thinking about it. You would imagine once he steps into this beast character, right? We often think about this as a bad thing, right? This seems like a bad thing. He turns into a beast. But this is actually a necessary step on the process of transformation. As you would imagine, why did he turn down the woman for the rose? He turned down the woman with the rose because he only looked in the world from a material perspective, right? That is the only thing that he cared about. I only care about my self-interest, and I only care about the things that are going to offer me immediate value, right? That was his view of the world. And a good way of looking at that is the Matrix. Have you ever seen that movie, right? The Matrix, the idea of the Matrix is literally you are only seeing a small portion of the world, and there's an entire world that exists outside of you, and you literally just don't want to focus on it. And we'll call that world the spiritual world. So we'll say this finite little box of the economic world, right? Of the traditional system of value, and all I care about is if you're going to offer me $5, I want something of $5 back, But then there's the spiritual world, and by becoming a beast, he has moved on from the king of the material world to the bottom rung of the spiritual world. That's the difference, right? So we could say, what the cynic would say, he's regressing, right? Because he's going from prince to someone who failed, right? But let's go back to the gym example, right? The problem is every time you try to step out of your little bounds, right, out of this little world that you have, we'll say in this case it's that's a good representation. So, if you're sitting on the couch and you are watching Netflix and you're just hanging out, you are the king of that world. You are really good at that world. But the problem is you're obviously not. That's not the good thing. You don't want to be king of the subpar world. You want to be king of the entire world. And whenever you decide that you are going to achieve some sort of goal, which is, in this case, going to the gym, you're going to realize that there's this beast within you that is completely inadequate to go to the gym. And you need to transform yourself to be able to get to the gym. That's the exact meaning. So if we're going to look at this, Peter Pan's a good example. This is why I brought up Peter Pan. The reason why he's king, right? The reason why he's prince here is because he's prince, but he's prince of the Lost Boys, right? And that's exactly what Peter Pan is. Peter Pan is king of the Lost Boys. So Peter Pan is the representation of somebody who is king, but he's king of the area that isn't really desirable, right? So maybe that's a good representation. A good representation is the people who are stuck in high school. That archetype, right? That person who was the best in high school, right? They were the popular kid, and they were incredible. Like everybody loved them, everybody wanted to be them, and then they get stuck, and they're lost in high school, right? And they keep remembering their high school days, and the reason behind that is because they were king of the Lost Boys. They were king of this small little domain in which they could control. But then once you tell them, move on to college, or move on to the real world, or move on to something that is beyond high school, right, which is, not a good representation of the real world, they decide not to. So they're stuck in this process of maturity, you could say, and they haven't matured. So you could say they're king of the Lost Boys. And so when the beast decides that he's going to become a beast, right, or in the process of realizing that he is a beast, that's a better way of saying it, he realizes that he's inadequate. And there's a good saying that really goes into this, and this is something that Jordan Peterson said. The fool is the precursor to the savior. If you want to go and achieve a goal, no matter what it is, you are going to be a fool. You are going to suck in the beginning. And the unfortunate reality is that is the representation of the beast, right? You are going to be a beast when you try to do something. The only question is whether or not you develop through there, because the reality is most people get stuck. Most people go to the gym for 2 weeks and then they fail and then they just remain a beast forever because they realize, right, going to the gym for 2 weeks sucks because 2 weeks and then quitting, right, or achieving any goal for a little bit and then quitting sucks because you realize that you're inadequate. You take that jump and saying, okay, I am not the person that I want to be. I want to be the type of person that goes to the gym, and I want to go to the gym, right? That's the idea of becoming a beast. But then you never develop and step out of your beastliness, right? You never become that person. You just remain as somebody who is inadequate, but you never actually develop. And in this case, you remain a fool and you never become the savior. And you ask the question, why do people never quit smoking? Why do people never take the steps to achieve their goals? And, you always run into this idea of never try to help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. Right? And you got to ask the question, why don't they want to be helped? Whenever we give somebody some sort of positive intervention, which is just essentially, hey, maybe you should stop eating so much, or hey, maybe you should stop smoking, or hey, maybe you should go and, pursue this career. Maybe you should go and, step out of your little box, this little regression box that you've put yourself in. And you ask the question, why do people blind themselves? Why do people why don't people listen, right? If somebody realizes, oh wait, I've gained 30 pounds and, I'm not really too happy about that. Why do they just sort of blind themselves from it? It's because they know the shame that comes to themselves when they become a beast and they fail. And you ask the question, is that reasonable? Yes, it's reasonable. Of course it's reasonable. It is more reasonable than anything. And, is it a good excuse? That's a different question. But if you're asking whether or not it's reasonable to deny a hero's journey, it is beyond reasonable. And, well, you ask the question why people don't do it, and that's why people don't do it. So I wanted to give more representations of this, because I think that this idea is really, really strong idea, and this is the precursor to life. If you actually want to go and achieve things, whatever it is, and this is a guy thing, this is a girl thing, whatever. If you actually want to achieve things, you're gonna have to put up with this ugly, evil part of yourself, and this fool, and well, I'll give you a bunch of examples. So if you've ever seen the movie E.T., right? E.T. is the perfect example. You have this little boy, right, who we'll say in the beginning was something like Peter Pan. Not completely, but obviously not developed, not mature. And then you have this little alien who comes along, who's the representation of maturity, right? Who's the representation of something that exists with beyond your known realm, right? This little world that you've come to understand. And it's the question of, what do you do with it? What do you do with it? Do you just take this alien and just say, I don't want to deal with you, you freaking ugly, you ugly thing that has no value to me, which is exactly what the beast does? Or you look at that and say, it is something that is beautiful, it is something that could be revered. And well, that's the process, right? Obviously, this child looks at it as something that could be revered. It's the same idea in Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch is also a good example. Alien comes along, ugly, unrefined, unreformed, and you have to make friends with it instead of running away from it. And that's the hardest part, right? Making friends with the fact that you're inadequate. Think about that. Making friends with the fact that you are not the person that you want to be. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing. Here's another representation. This was a GE commercial. GE's like they're a company. They're called General Electric, and they're the people who make your refrigerators, microwaves, ovens, all these things. And this was the representation of an idea. You take an idea and, well, imagine you say, my name is Steve Jobs, and I want to create this device that is in your pocket, and it plays music from your pocket, and it could store as many songs as it possibly can, and you could interact with it, and then you can contact people through it also, and you could do all these different things, and you could essentially have an entire, we'll say, an entire catalog of information in your pocket, sort of like I did with this computer idea. If someone were to come up and look at that idea, before it was actually a thing, it were to look something like this, something ugly, something unrefined, unreformed, something that's disgusting. And, well, most people would probably turn it down. They say, Steve Jobs, stop being dumb, right? But the question is, what do you do with something like this? What do you do with this unrefined thing? You have to nurture it. You have to work with it, because eventually, one day, it will turn into the savior. One day, it will turn into well, an iPhone, right, or an iPod. And that's the idea that they explored in this GE commercial. And actually, this was from 2016. For whatever reason, this idea stuck with me. Like this commercial, when I was creating this Beauty and the Beast PowerPoint lecture, for whatever reason, this idea stuck with me, and I realized that I remembered this, and I can't explain to you why I actually remembered this one commercial that I saw on TV one time. And, well, it had a profound impact on me, 4 years ago, and I can't really explain why. But that's really what it is, You have somebody who's unrefined, and that's also a great idea. This is not something that applies only to a person. It's a universal idea. It's a universal archetype. You take something that's unrefined and you need to nurture it, you need to love it, and then you need to recognize its value, right? Because that's the problem with the iPod, right? Or that's the beauty of the iPod. It was probably this ugly, stupid idea that made no sense, right? But it had a little bit of something in there, a little bit of value. And if you nurture that, if you treat it right, then you could shed off the crappy parts of it, and then the value within it comes in. And that's why you treat an idea with something with divinity. Now let's get back to you, right? Because we'll take this universal idea and apply it to you. You, when you decide to go to the gym, you are inadequate, you are unrefined, you are crappy, you are not the person that you want to be, and if you're going to the gym, maybe you're a little bit overweight, right? That's probably the representation of that. And the question is, what do you do with that, right? If we're going to follow this idea, what do you do with the fact that you're inadequate? Do you run away from it, or do you make friends with it, right? Do you nurture that part of you, and do you try to work with it? And that's the answer, right? Obviously, you work with it, because that is the idea of the Beauty and the Beast. Now, we have this idea of the rose, right? The idea of the rose is that by the time he turns 21, all the petals will go away and he will be a beast. Now that we understand essentially the entire meaning behind beauty, the basics behind Beauty and the Beast, this must be super easy. Right now, this must be super easy to understand. By the time that you turn 21, you will be a beast forever. Why will you be a beast forever? It's because you miss your process of maturity, right? Obviously, it's an oversimplification because some people have their little midlife crises, but if you don't shed your beastliness by the time that you're 21, you're essentially cemented. You've established your habits, you've established your way of viewing the world, and you're going to be stuck forever. That's a pretty good, it makes sense, right? I bet you that never made sense to you as you were watching this movie, but once you delve deeper, you understand that this actually all sort of comes together and this all makes sense. So now, I'll give you a brief introduction into Belle, I'll give you a brief introduction into this world, and then we'll move on to the next lecture, right? How are we doing with time? Okay, yeah, I'll give you a brief introduction. So, this is just a little bit of a teaser. So, again, this is your world, Belle is you. Let's go with that. So, who is Belle, right? Belle is somebody, first of all, let's get into the world, right? The world is run by a clock, right? It's run by a clock. And every day at, I think it was 12 o'clock? No, 8 o'clock. Every day at 8 o'clock, they get up and they do the same thing every single day. What is that? That's the representation of our world, right? Don't we do that? Isn't that how we act? So Belle is living in a world that is full of structure and, we'll say, full of economic value. That's a good way of putting it, right? Because that's exactly what the prince was struggling with. All he cared about is money, swindling people, right? This is something we'll get into. Money, bartering, and the little things, we'll say, right? And you'll see that in the song that she sings, right? The song that she sings is all about how the people in the town are, every morning just the same as the morning as we came, right? And then let's see what happened, right? There was somebody who, here's a good representation. You have all the children marching in line, right? They're all marching at the same time. You have there was some guy who tried to cheat on his wife, just a bunch of things, right? It's a shallow town. But then you have Belle, right? And Belle is the representation of somebody who sees a world that is shallow and only cares about this little world, right? This world that we were talking about of the prince, the world of self-interest, the world of structure. And she's the person who just happens to see beyond that. And the way I look at it is that we are all, we are all Belle, right? We are all Belle. And why are we all Belle? It's because we, as children, look at this system, right? We look at our culture that exists of orderliness and careers and jobs and self-interest, and we see this system and we say, it's just not that great, right? It's just not that great. And that's why when you're a kid, you say you want to be an astronaut. That's why when you're a kid, you never say, I want to be an accountant. I really, really want to be, I really want to have no impact on the world and do nothing, and just sort of get stuck in this system that so many people get stuck in. And you ask the question, it's like, why? And it's because we're Belle. We're all Belle, right? We look at this system and we say there must be more than this provincial life, right? That's the idea. And yeah, so she's well educated, right? I really like this idea. So obviously this is from the original Beauty and the Beast, and this is what we have. She's reading a book surrounded by sheep. And what does that mean? Obviously she's reading a book. She's educating herself, surrounded by people who are not interested in educating themselves, surrounded by people that are only interested in following the crowd because they never thought about it that way. They look at this world and God, maybe I'm Belle because there's something special in Belle here. I look around all the time, and I'm in college, and I ask the question. It's like, why are so many people, right? As a college business student, so I go to Indiana University, and we have a business school that focuses on accounting and finance, right? Which most people will look at and say blah, right? Because I agree. It's nobody spends their life as a kid, says, not like, I'm going to cure cancer, I'm going to be accountant. Nobody says, I'm going to go into finance or accounting, And the problem is because I've taken a lot of those classes and it kills your soul, right? It really does. It really kills your soul. So you look at something like, these sheep, and this is sort of the representation of, I guess, me in a business school, right? Because I feel like I am somebody who looks beyond the finance, looks beyond the accounting, and I'm surrounded by sheep who are just saying, okay, I'm going to be an accountant, I'm going to be a finance person. Why? Because the culture tells me to, right? Because obviously I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to gain a lot of respect in that way, and I'm self-interested, right? I'm focused on my economic self-interest. And that's the unfortunate reality. Whenever you establish a culture, you're going to have people who just sort of blindly follow the system. And blindly follow is probably the wrong way of saying it, because I think, obviously, following your economic self-interest is something that's good. But then, most of us, or at least a lot of us, can realize that there's something more than that. Right? There's something special in someone like Belle who says, wait a second, you're only looking at the world. So following your economic self-interest is only looking at the world. Imagine you have this entire world that exists here and you're only looking at it from one dimension. It's like, no, there are 5,000 dimensions that you could possibly look at, and you're looking at it, all you care about is economics. Again, money is something that is, again, a part of your world, right? Like, we can't discount the value of money, but then again, there's so much more that exists in this world. So, the question is, what is Belle, right? What is Belle? Belle is the antidote to the beast, right? She's the antidote to the undeveloped individual who only cares about self-interest and only cares about, we'll say, economics, roughly speaking. And, well, that's something that we'll be exploring in the next lectures, right? So we'll talk about Belle and how she refines the beast and how she handles the culture and how how she develops along with the beast. So that is the end of lecture 1, and I'll see you on the next one.